and welcome back to another Mugen masterclass. Today we are working on the letter V that consists of VarAdd, VarRandom, VarRangeSet, VarSet, VelAdd, VelMul, VelSet, and VictoryQuote. We're going to use our handy dandy Kung Fu Man. And before I start, what is a variable, right? A variable is basically something you can use as reference for something else. You give it a value and you can use it as a reference for something else. In this case, in Mugen's case, or rather my example of it is, think of it as a pocket. In the pocket you could put any number of things. And then you can refer to the pocket, like, pocket, how many of gumballs do you have? You know, I have 5 gumballs. Okay, so the number is 5. So think of it in a sense like that. You could use it as an on-off switch. If the variable is 1, you can do this. If it's 0, you can not do that. So, starting with the first one, we have VarAdd. Adds to one of the player's working variables, either a float variable or an int variable, integer, can be added to by this controller. And then it shows you. You have variables which are just f and float variables which are fv. Yeah, fv. And it shows you here pretty much. And also they're limited in a sense. You have 0 to 59 for variables and 0 to 39 for float variables. These are default numbers. I'm sure you can increase it if you mess with the settings. So to start off, in Fighter Factory, there's a little thing here on the side, left side, that says var. It's a clock. If you click it, it'll let you just hit OK. It'll tell you all the variables you're using and where you're using them. So variable 1 is being used in -1, which is the command file. Variable 2 is being used in state 810. So it's just for reference if you need to. So let's go with a VarAdd. This is what it looks like, right? And this is the standing light punch of VarAdd. So the trigger is going to be time equals 0. And let's go with variable 10. And we're going to add 1, right? So every time I punch, the stand light punch, it's going to add 1 to variable 10. I have a display to clipboard code here to display that. It's going to display variable 10 with a decimal. So you'll see 1.000. That is really loud. Let me lower that down. Okay. If you look in the bottom left, you can see var10 equals 0. Now when I light punch, it's 1. Press it again, 2. And as I keep pressing it, it goes up and up and up because that's what VarAdd does. It adds to a variable. You can also subtract. So if I were to put a value of -1, it will take away from it. So variables can go well into the negatives. You can have negative values. So it's like an infinite number line both directions. So there you go. That's VarAdd. Next is VarRandom. Sets the specified integer variable to a random value. Float variables cannot be set by this controller. So you pick your variable. And the example is quite interesting. You pick VarRandom, you pick your variable number, which is, I'm going to use 10 because that's the number I want to use, and then the range. So an interesting thing, the range, you could put 2 numbers. You could put the lowest number, comma, the highest number, so it could be a range between whatever, or you could just put the highest number like this and it'll work fine. So we're going to remove the VarAdd, put a VarRandom. So now, same thing. Remember, this is the same as time equals 0. We're going to do variable 10. The range is 0 to 1000, right? So every time I punch, that is going to change. So punch, I got 368. Punch, I got 251. I got 632, 440, 567. That's kind of cool. And every time I attack, it gives me a random number from 0 to 1000. I can also do it just like this. I'll get a random number from 0 to 1000. If I wanted to do something different, I could use 250, 500. Actually, no, let's go 350. So now it's going to give me back a random number in the variable 10 within the range of 250 and 350. 287, 313, 283, 256, 278. It doesn't exceed those values or go outside of those values. So that's how you would var random if you want something to randomize. Next is VarRangeSet. Sets a continuous range of the player's working variables to the same value. Either float or int variables can be set by this controller, but not at the same time. So let's do a VarRangeSet, right? We are going to set variables 10 to variable, let's go 15, right? We're going to set them all to 1. So now I need to update my display to clipboard to include all the variables. I'm not sure how many I'm allowed to put here, but I'll see. If it crashes, it crashes. $11, $12, $13, $14, $15. If it crashes, I put too many codes there. Sweet. Alright, so now if you look in the bottom left, variable 10 is 0, 11 is 0, 12 is 0, 13 is 0, 14 is 0, 15 is 0, and I punch, they're all set to 1. And I keep punching, well, that's what it's a range set, so I'm setting everything to 1 when I do it. So that's what you would do for VarRangeSet. It basically sets multiple variables to the same number. I've never used that one. I never use multiple variables for similar things, usually different things, but that's how it works if you want to do it. Next, we have VarSet. Similar to VarAdd, VarSet will just set it to whatever you want to set it to. Let's set this to 69, right? So not time equals 69. You know what? Let's change it up a bit. Let's put time equals 10. All right. So after 10 ticks, the variable is going to change to 69. If you look at the bottom left, you saw it was kind of delayed, so I'm already attacking. 10 ticks later, and boop, now it changes to 69. So your triggers are also important with these variables. It's not just, you know, right away sometimes. So like I said before, that's how a VarSet works. You're setting it to be whatever number at this trigger always. I think that's it for the variables. One major key thing I've not mentioned, which I'm going to mention now, if you read this here, do not use a variable code within a custom state of the enemy player, because as it says here, you will override P2's variables, which can cause unintended malfunction of the opponent player. So if you put a player 2 in a custom state, do not use a variable set or variable add in a custom state. It may screw up the opponent. Next we have VelAdd. Adds the specified amount to the player's velocity. A positive velocity is in the direction the player is facing. Okay, so the example is a gravity code. We're going to do something different. I'm going to make his light punch animation last really long. How long is this? This is 100 ticks, right? Really long. So now let's do a VelAdd code. Now what is it? Yeah, it doesn't mention it here, but the trigger for a VelAdd code has to be a constant trigger. So if I do anim equals 2, add 5 to my x velocity, right? It kind of goes forward a little bit, but then it stops. And there it goes. Okay, I'm gonna close that out. Sorry for that weird little pause there. I I just had to check something. That's all. I wasn't sure if I made this video or not, so I had to check. So yeah, for VelAdd, it needs a constant trigger. If you use a trigger like this, it'll work for a second, then it'll stop, right? So, and what it does is VelAdd will consistently add to the current velocity, right? So if I put time greater than 10, which is everything after 10, it's 11 ticks onwards, right? It's gonna add 0.1 velocity to this. So it's gonna constantly add 0.1 velocity till it goes up to like ridiculous speeds. Luckily this stage zooms out, so here, take a look. Okay, maybe that's too slow. Let's go with 0.5. It didn't go as fast as I thought it would. Oh, you know what also? Your physics has to be n. If your physics is stand, you have something stopping you. There's a hard stop for velocities when your when your physics is s. So when your physics is n, then you can properly use a VelAdd code. So here's how it works and how it's supposed to work. You saw how he incrementally came at him really fast, like whoosh, and he kept going. So that's the velocity adding to itself over time. It's actually comical. And if I did something like 1, it's basically your velocity is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. It's like really fast. It accelerates really fast. I lost control. There we go. They're going so fast they can't even hit each other. This works in the Y value as well, in case you want something to increase, to go upwards faster or downwards faster. The example it gave us was a kind of gravity code. I just like to use a gravity code. I've never used a VelAdd for that. What I have used a VelAdd for, and I'm trying to think about it, I honestly can't think of a time I used a VelAdd. I guess for like effects, like smoke flying off of a projectile or particles flying off a projectile, I have it like increase dramatically as it goes faster. Like that's probably the only thing. But it would be, again, you would use like 1.1 or 0.2 or something like that. You wouldn't use anything big, like whole numbers. Next is a VelMul. Multiplies the player's velocity by the specified amount. A positive x velocity in that direction is in the direction the player is facing, and y is downwards. So VelMul, right? VelMul only works if you have a current velocity, and it's also only active per tick. So if I do anim element 2, it's going to be active for 1 tick, and then it's not going to work. You need a constant trigger, so either 1 or like time greater than 10 and time less than 90, right? So I'm giving it a window of functioning opportunity. Now, if I put it to 1, it does nothing, and I'll explain why that is. So nothing happens, right? But now let me give myself a velocity of 5. So now I'm moving forward at 5, but the VelMul is still not doing anything, right? That's because this works in a sense of percentage. So if I am, if my VelMul is equal to 1, that's equal to 100% of my speed. 100% of my speed is whatever I set it to. It's 5. If I put it to 0.9, then that's 90% of my speed. Then and so on. 0.8 is 80% and so on. This will decrease my velocity by whatever this number is. Y has no value here because I'm not going up or down. I'm just going horizontally. But it works the exact same way. So I want to slow him. I want him to come to a slow stop. So let's do 0.5, right? So it's going to cut the 5 in half, which is 2.5, and then 2.5 in half, which is something I can't do off the top of my head. It's 1.25. Then divide that by half, you get 0.625. Divide that by half, you get that. And then you keep going down and down and down until it hits a full 0. So now from 10 ticks onwards to 90 ticks, my speed is going to be fractioned by 50%. And you saw I came to like a full stop because that's what happens at 10 ticks. Let's go to 50. So now I'll move forward and my speed's going to slow down. It's going to look natural too. Like I just came sliding out of something, but you see how it just comes to a stop? Now if I used like a 0.9, I'll have a slower stop, which is good because sometimes you want that slower stop. It looks better. See? That's how VelMul works. You get a nice slow stop. And this works in Y value and also. I use this code a lot. Anything that has the player moving forward to attack, but I don't want him to suddenly VelSet equals 0 to suddenly stop, I would use a VelMul to have him slowly go into it. An example of that, I'll showcase my envy right here. So I have her VelSet set to 7, right, on frame 3, and after 20 ticks, her speed's gonna stop at 0.5. So as you see, that's the 7, and that's the 0.3 at the very end, stopping her. So it's not a full hard stop. She's still inching forward a few pixels, which goes a long way in the visual effect of it all. Okay. So that's how VelMul works. I love this code. I use it for whatever I can use it for. Next is VelSet. Hey. VelSet works in the state def if you want it to activate right away, or if you want it to activate later on. Let's do -5 in the X, and let's do -5 in the Y. This is going to be time equals 50. So at 50 ticks, his velocity will go forward and it'll stop, send him up into the air. And he's going to keep going into the air. So let's go, and then whoops. There you go. So VelSet can basically set your velocity to whatever you want, whenever you want. You can also use decimals. So you could do 0.21 or let's see, 4.13, right? You can use decimals for speed. Sometimes a whole number is not the angle you want. So you want to use a smaller value to get an angle. You know, instead of like a 45, you want like a 10, you know, or a 20 or something else in between. But that's what VelSet does. The one in the state def will activate right away, instantly when you go into that state. But if you want to activate later, you'd use a VelSet, whatever trigger you want to activate later. And lastly is VictoryQuote. Selects the VictoryQuote from the player to display in the next victory screen. That is regarding the very top of your character under the quotes tab. These are your victory quotes. And I can't show this right now because I don't have a Mugen to show it in per se. Let's say I would, you know, kill you with a certain move. I would use this code like this, and the trigger can be whatever you want it to be. Like say I did a raging demon on somebody, right? I grabbed them, I beat them up, screen is dark, I have the victory quote set here in the character, and the quote is not time. I know they're gonna die, so I'm just gonna use quote number 2, right? And going here, quote number 2 is, you need a lot of training, come back in 10 years. And that's what quote does. Your trigger is very important, you know. You may need something like enemy not alive, which is the enemy's dead basically. Then it's gonna pick your quote number 2 to be displayed. But just the trigger is the most important thing, and trigger is a whole different topic that I don't know if I'm afraid to get into it or not. I don't know. I don't even know if I know everything about that. But that is all. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and stay tuned for more.
Let's go get some cheeseburgers.